Attack of the Clones. Not just a movie name, but also an apt description of the mobile game space whenever there's a massive hit. It's actually pretty amazing to think about, but there also used to be a lot of other games that experience cloning as well. Doom, Super Mario Bros., Asteroids. The cloning of games is not a new thing at all. In fact, genres often spring from game cloning. But that doesn't exactly mean it's good either. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx we ask the question, how do some mobile games completely rip off other games? Well, let's start with Flappy Bird. Flappy Bird is a very basic concept. It's a one-tap game that requires you to keep the Flappy Bird in an area of the screen where he doesn't collide with one of two pipes that come down from the top and bottom of the screen. This was a tremendously popular game, and on top of that, a huge number of clones just came out of nowhere. A lot of people asked, why can they even do that? What exactly about this is allowed? And yes, there are games that were similar to that came out prior, but not exactly the same. And if there were any that were exactly the same, there was nothing that could compete with the popularity of Flappy Bird that came out with that concept prior to Flappy Bird. There's a specific reason that this isn't a huge problem. Intellectual property actually works very much regarding these types of works, a video game, a set of instructions, as just that. Writing. People write code. And the code itself for Flappy Bird and every single game out there that is not Flappy Bird is different. Now, in order to make the game, the code would have to do the same functions, but it wouldn't be the same thing. It would have to actually be a tremendous coincidence for it to be the exact same thing. Because for one, other programmers don't have access to the source code of Flappy Bird. For two, if somebody creates a tutorial labeled quote-unquote how to make a Flappy Bird clone and doesn't copyright the code that they make in that tutorial, that code can be copied as many times as you want. And if the net result is a Flappy Bird game, well, it doesn't matter how much that code was copied because it's not the same code as Flappy Bird. So on the surface, it may look like a very similar game, but the actual code is different. Now, if someone reverse engineered Flappy Bird and just made it so that it was their own custom skin of it and sold it as their own game, well, that would be illegal. But if they created their own code or used code that was deemed alright to use by somebody else who made their own code, it's not an infringement of copyright. This is why both Android and iOS exist. They're both very, very similar, and Apple holds a lot of patents as to how things work in iOS. But Android just does them differently. It has different functions, it has a different programming language, and though the result of the actions taken are exactly the same as if it was done on an iPhone, internally a lot of things would have had to have happened differently in order for it to be okay on an Android phone. And that's exactly what happened. There's more than one way to do everything, and where there is a will, there's always a way. Another good example is the genre of Match 3. Now, there are a million Match 3 games, and a lot of them are pretty much the same thing. Back in 1994, a game called Shiriki came out on MS-DOS. It is pretty much exactly the same game as Candy Crush Saga and Bejeweled. It's a lot uglier, it's just circles with colors in them, but the point is it's the same idea. The difference here is that the idea is expressed ever so slightly differently, either artistically speaking or even in the rules. For instance, Bejeweled Blitz is different from Bejeweled. And in every one of these games, the art assets is different as well. Now, in the case of platform games, there's about 1 million platform games. And Super Mario Bros. Wasn't the first. That being said, let's just use that as a quick start point for what I'm intending to say. Oftentimes, genres start as batches of clones. Whether it be Flappy Bird, or Candy Crush, or Shiriki if you want to go back to 94, you end up seeing a lot of expressions of a single idea, and the second one does something different, specifically does something better, people stop calling it a clone and say it's better than Candy Crush. It's better than Super Mario. Or there's something about it that I like better, it does it better to my taste. For instance, Sonic the Hedgehog could easily be called a different expression of the ideas that Super Mario Bros. Brought forward. Sonic the Hedgehog caters more towards people who might want something oriented towards speed though, and it has a completely different art style. Now, the reason why it's important to frame things this way is that if a certain game does a certain thing, and somebody else does it slightly different or better, it creates a market. And within that market is competition. And in theory, and I do say in theory, just to keep that in mind, it creates a kind of arms race dichotomy. And if that actually plays out that way, the end result is that you'll get a better game. Now, can you imagine if the only platforming games that had ever been made were Super Mario Brothers? And every year, they continually released a new set of levels. Now, that would still be a unique product if you think about it. It wouldn't have to develop. There wouldn't have to be big differences in what's going on. It would be literally the only thing like that. But the fact is, we have a lot of different products that are oriented towards somebody who likes a side-scrolling platformer, but indulges different tastes, be it aesthetic or mechanical. So the next question is, how can a graphics technique be patented and not a game? Well, a graphics technique is one specific method to achieve one specific end result. Now, the problem with that is that you can't really own the end result. Shine on water, for instance, is not a work of art. So from that perspective, if you can code a different way to make the water shiny, you're just fine. But if you create a world that contains shiny water and very specific geometry, you can copyright that as intellectual property. If somebody makes something that looks very similar to it without using your actual geometry though, and not using your code to make the shine on the water, it's not really illegal in any way. It's tremendously nuanced, and we could probably go on for a very long time, but you probably want a simple answer. So why is it okay for somebody to essentially clone a video game? Because the clones aren't exactly clones. They're original works that may be derivative and maybe look to imitate the original type of work, but it was built on original content. Now, if you literally copied a game and called it something that you made, actually doing the literal definition of cloning, you'd be in trouble. You'd probably get sued, and that's not okay. But if it were not allowed to make something similar, if you couldn't make a game that intended to do the same things as another game, plus maybe the things that you wanted to do, or just hoping to do it better, or slightly different, or even just the same but with a different look, etc., if you made that illegal, you pretty much would stop new genres from ever happening. You probably think this might be a little bit weird, but if that type of quote-unquote copying wasn't legal, it would legitimately stifle innovation, which is ironic, but the truth. So what do you think? What are your favorite clones that actually turned out maybe better than the original game? Let's meet in the comments, and I'm interested to hear your responses on that. It's a different topic, let's just say. If you enjoyed this video, please click like, and if you're not subscribed, you should do that right now. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and that's the best way not to miss them. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.